We knew that there were South Korean troops that kind of like stormed their capital or reverse stormed the capital. They were holding the capital, stopping people from getting in. It turns out it's actually, so now that like more information is about this, it's actually a little goofier and stupider and more confusing than people thought. Apparently his like defense minister was like Googling essentially like how to stop Parliament from blocking martial law once we like ahead of time.
He was Googling this shit?
It was apparently there was, I don't, Google's a strong word, but there was research done of like how to like what's the mechanism for stop, because like he knew that like the South Korean like Congress, the South Korean Parliament can override the martial law. His administration was trying to find out, well, how do we stop them from stopping our martial law? So this was definitely premeditated. It was planned.
Yeah.
Also,
I mean, most coups are planned. You don't just
sort of, except for this one was so poorly like executed that it almost feels
kind of
like
when they try to get
planned.
Juan Guaido to become the president of Venezuela.
Yeah, so like I don't know what's going on. So anyway, like the defense minister also tried to instigate a skirmish with North Korea. He had ordered strikes on this area of North Korea where like there's like a trash dump type area. He tried to like order airstrikes on, and like I guess that was refused. And so like shout out to like a handful of soldiers in the South Korean military, because if they hadn't like basically disobeyed direct orders, like he intentionally tried to start a war with North Korea. Like
wow.
They intentionally tried to like there was an actual order to strike North Korea.
Before we get to the video, please like, comment, subscribe, share it to that uncle who's a communist. And if he isn't, he will be.
Don't forget to follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/revolutionary rhetoric. And Revolutionary Rhetoric is an affiliate of the Anti-Capitalist Podcast Network.
All right, let's get to the video. All right, so episode 55.
55.
55.
Are you too young for 55?
Yeah, probably. I'm not.
You know what I'm talking about? This is pre-YouTube. This is like E-Bombs World, and like
I don't know what E-Bombs is.
It was like a video sharing site from like 2003, 2001, 2000.
Yeah.
I don't know, give or take. I think it. I don't know when exactly, because I was young. I was like 12. I turned 12 in 2000. But like,
so I was 5. So
yeah,
this
was like when you're a teenage boy looking at like, you know, videos on the internet, like funny videos on the internet. YouTube didn't exist in like 2008 or whatever, right? So like
2005, but it didn't take off until like 2006, 2007.
Yeah, so like,
but by then I was
that,
like 12, and then I really got into YouTube. When
we
I
were
was
streaming videos prior to that, but on sites like E-Bombs World. Yeah, there was like websites,
cool.
but they were like, they had dedicated different websites you had to go to like watch.
Yeah,
videos.
there was like almost like a Reddit type of forum.
Sort of, yeah. And then there was like, I forget the video itself, but it was 55 was the song. I forget. Never mind. This is like old head internet. It's like early internet stuff.
I was still old enough to experience and like use LimeWire.
Yeah,
illegally downloading music. Oh,
I'm old enough. I used Napster. I was.
Oh my god, yeah. See, that was just one little generation before mine.
Yeah,
I was part of the MySpace
seriously like
crowd.
a couple years past Napster.
MySpace was like my middle school, man. That was, you know,
MySpace was my high school. That was like that was it, man. We were all on MySpace.
Yeah, because I always remember.
I miss
like,
MySpace.
yeah, your 8 best friends.
Yeah,
and you'd have like the first one, and then the second one, and your second best friend was like, "Why am I not the first?"
Two? Yeah,
I'm like, dude, this is so toxic, man.
I like had mine. Like that's where I learned how to do like HTML, and like I had my page like hella customized.
Oh yeah.
I think I hid my top like friends or whatever, because I was like,
I didn't know that you could do that.
You can customize. I had like, it was cool. I had like, you know, you had embedded music, so like just going on somebody's page, it would play music, and then like I had mine as like minimalistic and like small. You could like customize them pretty good.
I did that. I just didn't know you can customize like the best friends, where you can.
Yeah, you could remove them. I think there was code to have it removed.
I had this like Kobe Bryant back print on mine. It was all yellow and purple, and those are my middle school days.
Yeah, this is like, what was that squirrel that was addicted? It worked at like or hated Starbucks or something.
God, that.
Yeah, Crunchy the squirrel or something.
No.
And then there was Salad Fingers.
Salad Fingers.
And then there was
this is beyond my comprehension.
The end of the world. The French whales didn't have a nap. This is like, I'll make you a mixtape, but instead of a mixtape, it'll be like old YouTube, like videos. They're on YouTube, but they're like, they predate YouTube.
Okay.
They're like memes before memes were like really invented. Like back in the day,
American home videos or whatever the fuck.
Nah, I mean they were like just goofy internet like flash videos that people made, but like
4chan and shit.
Yeah, again, it wasn't. I don't think 4chan even existed back then. Maybe it did. I didn't go on it, but anyway, it was just like that's what everybody watched. Like every middle school boy in like America knew what like that squirrel. I forget the name of that squirrel, or like Trogdor, the Burninator, burninating the countryside. Okay, every middle schooler, every kid who like was born in like the late 80s or like mid to late 80s, like every millennial basically. 'Cause you're not a millennial, right?
I am the last year of millennial.
You're the last year of
95.
millennial. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're like, elder millennials know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like,
Anyway.
enlighten me, good sir. All right, well, episode
could not
55.
matter less. Yeah.
Welcome back.
We took a week off.
Yeah,
remember
there's some
why.
stuff going on, but we'll get. Don't worry, we'll get way more consistent. I didn't realize how inconsistent a lot of podcasts were because I'm like trying to make sure that we get it out every single week for
In
you
our
fucks.
defense, dude, we were every week for like 50 weeks or almost. We missed
2 weeks.
episode 6. We missed for some reason, and then we didn't miss again until like episode 40 or something.
Yeah, so we've been pretty consistent. But then like I talked to other podcasts, like sometimes like 1 or 2 episodes of like a month, or one or 2 episodes every 2 months. I'm like, damn, bro, is that really a podcast or that's just like?
And next Thursday's Christmas, so we'll probably miss next week again.
Yeah. Well, up to you. I work Christmas and Christmas Eve.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be with my family, so like, I'll probably have to miss that week. But
that's fine.
We're recording on Sunday though. With this, we're guesting on somebody else's podcast. We can just release that on.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
We just got to make sure with them if they're okay of having.
I assume they would be, but I'm really excited for that.
That'll be fun, man.
That's confirmed, right?
Yes, that is confirmed. We literally booked it and everything.
Yeah, you booked it, right?
Yeah, I booked it.
Okay, because I
22nd.
I couldn't remember if I was supposed to book it.
No, I booked it.
Okay, cool.
22nd at
So we
11.
can talk about that then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going on a Better Way 2A podcast. Give them a follow. A Better Way 2A. It's actually it's a firearms and like a leftist gun advocacy like podcast. I've listened to a couple of episodes. I've been following them on Instagram. They do like some giveaways and stuff. I think his name is Justin or Jordan. Actually, I got to double check his name. Seems like a cool guy. Just based on social media. I've had a little bit of social media interaction with him now, but I'm really excited for that. That's on Sunday.
Yeah.
We're recording that on Sunday, so I don't know when his schedule is to release, but we'll see if it's cool with him. We'll release that as our weekly episode that following week.
It's interesting because like as much as we agree with each other a lot on like 95% of things, 96% of things, I think this is like going to be like my most liberal take, I guess. Probably just because of my background, and I don't know. I was never really not necessarily anti-gun or pro-gun. I just like very heavy restrictions on weapons.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually good too, because it's good to have both those sides, and I'm really excited for this conversation to get that perspective, because I've been inundated. Me and my friends, and basically like my world has always been like super pro gun and I've grew up with guns. I own many guns. I've just like, it's never seemed strange to me to have like firearms everywhere.
Grew up in a different state.
I just grew up in a different world, right?
That.
So like I'm curious to kind of hear your perspective about that. I'm really excited for that discussion. I think that's going to be fun.
It'll be interesting, no animosity or anything. Just everybody has credible. I don't really know too much about the podcast that we're going on. To be honest, you probably know more than I do.
I've been trying to like cram.
I'm trying to watch a couple episodes before we get on there, so that'll be interesting. But I think I will be probably the least quote unquote pro gun, whatever, Second Amendment person on there. So hopefully they don't have too much animosity toward me either. But I don't think so.
I don't think so. And I mean, like, knowing you,
because again, I'm not anti-gun.
Right. Yeah. No. But I mean, we've talked about this briefly. I think I don't know if we've ever talked about this recorded, but like I know your position of like just more regulation and more like restrictions on access to guns and gun usage is
correct.
Yeah. I don't know. We're not talking about guns tonight, but
well, it's relevant to what they're going to see next week. There's just a little snippet on what we could possibly put out next week for our missing week.
So stay tuned for that. Go follow A Better Way 2A podcast and look for them up on social medias, and we'll be talking with them soon. So look forward to that episode on their feed and on ours. So cool.
Oh yeah. But before we begin, I just want to say, if you're listening to this on an audio podcast, please leave us a review. It really helps out more than you think. Our audio portion is really shared, and the algorithm is really spread out when we have reviews, because the more reviews you have, the more they will recommend our stuff to other people that have not been exposed to our podcast yet. So
that's the liking, sharing, and subscribing equivalent of a YouTube video is leaving a review. That's how, because like there is no liking and sharing and commenting on podcasts. It's how you get those generating in the algorithm, and how you get those spread to more people is by leaving reviews. We really appreciate that. If you're listening to this on audio, so long as you're not like actively driving, go ahead.
Yes, do not do anything while driving.
Live your life.
My God, yeah, I'm not your mother. But just leave whatever review you think we deserve. I'm not asking for 5 stars. I'm just asking for a review, and I would just love if you could put written reviews. I would love to have a a little short of us talking about written reviews and what people are saying it, and maybe we put it on
we could read
Patreon.
them out. Yeah, if you leave a written review, we'll read them out and maybe put them on the Patreon, free Patreon, by the way.
Exactly.
A little subtle plug for our free Patreon. Go check us out over there. And see a little bit of bonus stuff over there for free.
Yeah. And with that, let's begin. Where do we begin?
We've missed 2 weeks, and so much has happened. There are so many big things that would have been the big thing had not the next big thing taken it over. And I will admit, if this is the last week of school, it's been finals. Oh, I talked about you to my kids.
Did
this
you?
week.
What did you say?
Well, okay, so relevant. This final unit, it was a little 2-week mini unit. I think I may have mentioned this in a couple of previous episodes. We did a little mini unit on genocide. So we did a Socratic seminar, a student-led Socratic seminar on genocide. It was kind of their final for this unit. And one of the case studies, I gave them 4 case studies, and one of them was Bosnia.
Oh, cool.
So they had to part of their preparation and sources they had to come knowledgeable on. One of the 4 country case studies was Bosnia.
Yeah.
And I'm a friend of mine, and I kind of told the story of you and your family to the little extent that I know. And I didn't use your name or anything, but I'm just I have a Bosnian Muslim friend who this is very relevant to. Yeah.
What was the other one? Rwanda?
Rwanda's not one. I actually do that one in an imperialism unit. We talk about the Dutch and German.
What are the other ones?
It runs the gamut of objectively a genocide, and then I have the students research them, and then they have to decide for themselves in groups whether or not this constitutes a genocide. And because I've given them all the UN documentation, the UN definition, so it was Cambodia, Zimbabwe, and Syria, which is relevant to what we're talking about. And actually, that one was fun because I was this Syria one, those documents are from 2018 or something. It was at the height of the Syria civil war, when I think at that point maybe only there had been 4 million total displaced according to the sources that they had.
Well, would that be confirmed as a genocide?
Because
because it's usually somebody that's ethnically targeted, minorities. It doesn't have to be ethnicities.
So the UN qualifies it as there's 4 qualifiers by the UN standards. So it's and this is from I think Raphael. I know a lot about this because I've been teaching this all for the last 2 weeks. But it's there's 4 classifications. It's racial, religious, ethnic, or nationality. And so my question posited to the kids was, in Zimbabwe and Syria's case, it was those are political enemies or political.
Because at that point, couldn't you not and this is basically under the UN's, right?
Yeah. And so,
okay.
Yeah.
So I was I would even add ideological there, because
that was my question to them so part of my final questions to my students was, does the genocide have to match the UN's definition, in your opinion, to count as a genocide? And I use Zimbabwe and Syria as an example of that. Is that by definition doesn't match because they're more political opposition that are being killed. According to the UN, that wouldn't count. And Cambodia is very similar too, although Pol Pot did kill, he did target. There was Muslims, both Vietnamese and Cambodian Muslims that were targeted.
Yeah.
And so there's.
I just don't think he had any sort of.
Pol Pot was a megalomaniac who just was a mass murderer who had no real
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, and that was where I kind of went to this little lecture. I could sit on my soapbox because a lot of the sources just refer to it as communist regime Pol Pot, and I was
I hate that, man.
This is communism. This is to communism what I don't know some.
Those how the Republicans this is what communism is gonna be. This is what communism mass genocide. The only one that I can concur that was actually actively fits the Republican conservative narrative was Pol Pot.
Yeah,
the dude was just a psychopath.
But
he used the communist ideology as basically a crutch.
Exactly right. That's kind of how because it's just I was trying to get this across to my kids. It's really hard explaining communism to kids definitionally. If you explain it using anecdotes or using analogies or symbols, they get it. But talking about agrarian working class class consciousness is kind of difficult. And so Pol Pot wanted an agrarian peasant society. He wanted a society of equality where that class, he wanted class solidarity, a classless society with only one class, but he wanted that class to be uneducated, feudal farming peasants. And so instead of manufacturing an economic system wherein that would happen naturally over time, and the bourgeoisie class would be eliminated through collective bargain or collective ownership of stuff, actual Marxism practices.
Yeah.
His skip ahead, his cheat method to get to skip from page 1 to skip to the last page was just to kill anybody who was not a farming peasant,
or anybody with any descent,
or anybody who's educated, or anybody who is literally not an uneducated peasant. Just kill them. Therefore, you will have a classless society of farming peasants. And it's like, my
And
guy,
friends,
that's not actually like what Marx meant with classless society. So that is as far as communism you can get. And so like that's what I want people to understand about Pol Pot and communism. If you're listening to this and you're a liberal, like that. I mean, there is no analogy. Like, there's no extreme of capitalism. Like, this is to communism what blank is to capitalism. I can't think of like, and part of that is because everything terrible, like the Indian famine Churchill caused is to capitalism. But like, no, that is by definition capitalism.
Honestly, the best thing you could probably come up with at this point would be like Nazi Germany, and it's not direct ideologically, but he had a set people that he wanted to be part of that ruling class, or just that class that the only class to exist, which was, you know, so-called Aryan people. And Pol Pot was kind of like, we just want peasant farmers who are uneducated. And so that's the only like, and Hitler himself was a capitalist, staunch capitalist. When you're a fascist, you're a staunch capitalist.
That's like, that's peak capitalism.
That's peak capitalism. So that's the only like really. So
even that
comparison.
Analogy doesn't work. You can't say Pol Pot is to capitalism as to Hitler is to capitalism, because like that doesn't actually work, because Hitler is a capitalist. But I guess you could say like, methods. what Pol Pot is to communism what like the Nazi regime is to democracy, right? Like, so it's just like that's like I think the best analogy you kind of come up with.
Yeah.
But even though I don't really equate communism and democracy, because one is an economic and political ideology, and one is only a political ideology. So it's not a one for one. It's not apples to apples.
Yeah.
It's really hard. Communism is really okay. Yeah, we went off.
He's just, let's put it this way. He's a really weird, fucking subset, really bad guy.
Pol Pot is the only communist I won't defend. I'll defend Stalin. I'll defend Ho Chi Minh. I'll defend Mao and Lenin and Marx, Thomas Sankara, Che Guevara, Fidel Castro. I'll defend them all.
Yeah. But you have to understand when other communist countries had to intervene to stop a communist.
Vietnam did. Yeah, Vietnam stopped
with the help of China.
Cambodia.
With the help of China. They invaded Cambodia to stop the dude.
Chill. Stop.
Exactly. So it's like when other communist countries are invading to stop the guy, it's like, you can't be like, this is communism. It's like, okay, then why are other communists literally doing a military invasion to stop the guy?
Yeah. So,
you know.
Yeah. Anyways, so that was the unit. That's right. I don't know why we started talking about, that was because of you. Anyway, because I brought you in, not because of you.
I know, I'm just
because me bringing you up to my students. Anyway, so my point, the reason for the actually brought me full circle is to the students. I was saying like the Syrian one is kind of relevant because this is in the news again. I was teaching that last Monday, and it was that Sunday that Assad fled.
Yeah.
So Sunday the 8th, I believe. So we can start with Syria if you want,
because
we're kind of on topic. Sunday the 8th, the Assad regime, so-called regime, finally kind of collapsed, and that's when he fled with his family to Moscow.
Yeah.
And I was like talking to my kids, I was like, you guys are reading about this is like, these are old sources, but this history is happening right now, which is kind of that's a pretty cool thing for a history teacher to be able to like, look, if we just turn on the news, something happened yesterday that's relevant to the sources you're reading now.
Yeah.
It's all relevant.
To be honest, that shit's happening every day, dog, right now.
That's fair, but not to these 14 and 15-year-olds. They rarely get to see like history happening. That's something that they're also seeing in their textbooks, so to speak. So.
But I'm saying like the history is happening in the making at all points right now, and it brings me back to that Lenin's quote. You know, there's some weeks where there's some decades where nothing happened. There's some decades where nothing happens, and there's weeks where decades happen.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've been in that lingo for the past year where just shit is going down.
Yeah.
But to bring it back to Syria, just to give you guys a very like simple background, Bashar al-Assad, I mean, dude, not the greatest fucking leader. Let's be honest. He's not the greatest dude, but he is opposed to Western imperialism. If you go back through his family, they go into what we call a Ba'athist socialist party.
Yeah.
That's what they considered themselves. Ba'athist in Arabic, if you don't know, it means resurrectionist, right? So it's quote unquote revolutionary. So these people were Arab nationalists who are tired of Western imperialism basically dictating what their lives are, and they're trying to basically take all of their, political, economic, blah 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 into their own hands. And early on in Syria, there was if you read into it, there's just coups every other week in Syria for the past like 50, 60 years. So this is nothing new to these people.
Yeah, I mean, there's been
eventually it came to the point where the Ba'athist party basically took hold after a few coups, and the Baathists considered themselves socialist. And again, this is like where things kind of like there's a gray area. You know, you consider yourself a socialist, but like, are you actually implementing Marxist ideals, communist ideals, socialist ideals? And over time, this Ba'athist party in Syria, which is also tied to the Ba'athist party of Iraq, mind you, the Ba'athist party of Iraq came out with Saddam Hussein. So just throwing that out there. These people had this like socialist ideal, but also like this Arab nationalism where they wanted to unite all of the Arab nations together to basically create this stable environment where they cannot be influenced nor subjugated to Western ideals. They had their own power, blah, 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 blah. Over time, the Ba'athist party in Syria actually kind of split into two. One was like the ideologues. It was like two main people. I can't remember their name. And then the other two major characters were the military portions of the Ba'athist party. And one of them was Hafiz al-Assad. Yeah, that was Bashar al-Assad's dad.
Okay. Right.
And that's basically how that's how the Assad family came into power, was basically through this split in the Ba'athist party in Syria, where the military kind of just had more power than the ideologues. Over time, a lot of the people in Syria, especially like the mercantile class and the people that had immense amount of power and wealth in Syria, were kind of revolting because of some of the socialist ideals that they're trying to implement. And with Bashar al-Assad's dad, he kind of liberalized the economy a little bit to kind of ease tensions. And it kind of just went downhill from there from a socialist perspective. They never really regained any Marxist footholds, anything like that.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us to today, where this Assad family had, problems with Israel, just like every other Arab country. They had multiple wars. They allied themselves with multiple characters and organizations throughout the Middle East to basically take on Israel. And this is what really brought them to making enemies with the U.S. Because if you're an enemy with Israel, you're the enemy with the U.S. And so if you really think about it, who's going to be your natural ally at that point? It's going to be the USSR and Russia today. And that's how we come to this kind of strategic alliance between Russia and Syria today.
Yeah, Russia's been like a really like true friend to Syria for a long time. Like Russia's been fighting in Syria alongside Syria in their civil war for since the beginning. Like it's what I think one of the longest sustained conflicts Russia's been in recent history.
Correct.
And yeah, I mean it's been Russia and Syria kind of against their detractors for a long time. And yeah, I would agree with you that I'm not like the Assad's biggest fan in terms of like politics and stuff, but I will say that like I do like I'll stand with Assad against Western imperialism. Just like I fuck Putin. I don't agree with. I'm not a Putin fan. I don't support Putin.
I noticed a lot of socialists and communists want to fucking put Daddy Putin on a fucking pedestal.
I'm not one of those, but I will say like
either.
But I will like step back and say that like if Putin and Assad want to kind of like challenge Western hegemony, then like I'll stand with that. I'll stand with their
correct.
I'll stand with their attempt to like push back against the like imperial core of like the Western hegemony.
Yeah.
So like it would be like an alliance of convenience, I guess I would say.
It's not a black and white.
It's not a black and white thing, but like were to come down between like Russia or the U.S., I would stand with Russia, or Syria or the U.S., or Syria or Israel, I would stand with Syria.
I would stand with neither between Russia.
Well, that's what I guess that's fair, but like
I
see my point.
Yeah, I completely see your point. You're just opposed to Western imperialism.
Yeah.
I totally get it.
And if they oppose that, and if they not go further than oppose that and fight it, then I am not going to sit and judge them for fighting.
Oh, absolutely not. And that's like why we were backing it on for the longest time while this whole conflict was going on between Israel and
again, that's
Iran,
another good example, right? I'm not the biggest fan of Iran. However,
Iran's domestic policies with being
really
really anti-liberal human rights
problems. Yeah,
dude, we're not going to ignore that. But what we will say,
I'm not going to apologize, or I'm not going to defend it for sure.
Absolutely not. There are a lot of problems in Iran's political atmosphere where a lot of women don't have a lot of rights. Although minorities in Iran actually fare fairly well. I mean, the Jewish community,
that's true of most Muslim communities. Like most Muslim countries
Yeah.
don't really have the same kind of like minority or racial issues that like Western or Christian
Although
or
I would
Judeo-Christian,
say
nations do.
I would say Syria, Iraq does.
Yeah, okay.
And those are the two things and why there's so much conflict going on right now. As if you remember, if you watched way back in our episode, I think it was episode 2 or 3, we talk about the Sykes-Picot Agreement.
Well,
these countries were basically formed from lines drawn on a map from Western imperialist states post World War One. Yeah. England, France, and a bit of Russia, but it's mostly Russia England and France. Yeah. So basically, they drew lines on a map, forgetting about like major fucking ethnic minorities or ethnic majorities. Because if you remember, Iraq, Turkey, Iran, even parts of I think Armenia, Syria, they all have this huge ethnic group of Kurds. And if you don't know, Kurds are like literally the largest ethnic group of like 40 million people that don't have their own recognized states, right? And then we from there we can move to, there's a lot of Sunnis in Syria, and then we move to Alawites of Syria, the Druids of Syria. So Syria is a plural cultural state, and it's that way because these lines were drawn on a map. If there were better like treaties and better things that were planned more properly, where they gave Kurds their space, they gave these people their space, I think there would be no civil war, or there would practically be no problems for the most part, besides Israel trying to intervene in things. But that's not what they wanted. Yeah, the whole reason why they drew that up is because, and this is a lot of problems with a lot of things where the Baathists are actually have a correct opinion on, which they don't have too many correct opinions on, in my opinion. The whole point of their Arab nationalism is not to show superiority to other people. It's just to create a stable state where Arabs are not worried about Western imperialism taking over, other different types of countries taking advantage of them. And that's why in, I think it was 1961, Egypt and Syria united into one country. Yeah. The United Arab Republic. Right. And they're, I think they put Iraq in there too. And this was under, God, what's his face?
The Egyptian president?
Yeah, Nasser. This is from under Nasser. Yeah. Syria had problems with this because once Egypt, and you have to remember, Egypt is a large country. This country right now has close to 100 million people. Syria is like, what, 15 million? Yeah. 20 million. So
I think they're about equivalent in land size, but Syria just has a lot less people.
I wouldn't even say that. I would say in fertile land, they're like equivalent land, because Egypt is mostly desert, right? But the problem a lot of Syrians had were that Egypt looked at them. They almost felt like Egypt kind of like accumulated their land and their people and their country into Egypt, and they were one country.
Syria is like a quarter the size of Egypt in land mass.
Yeah. And so a lot of these Syrians felt like they were just being consumed by Egypt and not equal standing in power. And so that United Arab Republic kind of fell apart very quickly, which caused a lot of civil disarray, caused a lot of like coups going on again. So they've been going on for, since independence, 70 years ago, 80 years ago. They've been basically in turmoil, right? And now we come to the point of ISIS.
The elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room. So ISIS was a multicultural Islamic empire where a lot of Muslims, crazy religious zealots, decided to go into northwestern Iraq and northeastern Syria and basically claim a plot of land and just start basically doing a gruesome campaign all over the Middle East. And they did quite well for themselves, unfortunately. And these people are hyper religious. These people are fucking gross when it comes to mistreating artifacts from ancient history. I've watched videos of them destroyed like literally ancient cultures.
That's like
because they're like these are gods, these are pagan gods, blah blah blah. I'm like, dude, this is history. Nobody fucking believes this shit. And nobody believes that Apollo's up in the sky. And if you do, you're a fucking idiot. I'm sorry.
As a historian, and I imagine as an archaeologist, you can probably sympathize with this. Is like watching the destruction of like not only the Iraq War, but also like the Syrian war, like how many like Damascus being bombed and like how many priceless like historical just like buildings and artifacts, and like this is human history. This is like the birthplace of like humanity.
Exactly, because you have to remember Syria and Iraq were literally the cradle of civilization.
That was Mesopotamia, and like
Syrian, also not to mention the Assyrians that live.
Yeah, the Assyrian Empire, like all
which
of
is not Assyrian, and they're Assyrian.
No, the Assyrian Empire. just like this is like kind of some of the earliest civilizations, and like
Aleppo being bombed to fucking shreds.
Oh yeah, I remember like Aleppo was bombed in like 2016 or whatever, and
Damascus
I was like,
is one of the oldest cities standing.
Yeah,
right?
Baghdad is like a ruin of what its former self, and like these are like some of the old. These cities are like 8,000 years old or whatever, and it's like 6,000 years old, and it's like this is like some of the earliest recorded human history, and like the human artifacts are just being destroyed.
Yeah,
and that's really neither here nor there, but as a historian, I'm like, no, please, I wanted to go there someday and see these.
Yeah, when they're destroying history. So it's like, so the point is, it's not that ISIS, was destroying history or this or that. The point is like these people, they had almost this innate lack of education where they were just basically smothered by really hyper religious thoughts, where anything that wasn't the way they thought should be destroyed and annihilated, almost like a Pol Pot kind of thing. You know what I mean? I think, and I think that this is also speculative. I don't think that they were Israel, because the people like ISIS is Israelis, secret intelligence service, blah blah blah.
No, I'm not that conspiratorial,
right?
Yeah.
But that you have to come to the acknowledgement that if they did so much shit to stop Saddam Hussein, they did so much shit to stop Gaddafi. They invaded so many countries, but when it came to ISIS, they let them roam. Basically, they let them roam the countryside, destroying things, and they could easily stop them. And they were using that as like basically political pawn, basically as it's basically just a proxy war, because they're funding the Kurdish forces to fight ISIS, but then Turks hate the Kurdish forces, but the Turks also don't like ISIS. And then the Iraqi militias were being funded by the Iranians, right, and trying to fight ISIS. And then now they're mad at Iran trying to get involved to take out ISIS, but they hate ISIS as terrorists. The Syrian government is there, just trying to survive, blah blah blah. It's you can see like the political distraught that's going on in the area, and they're letting it happen. The Western imperialists are letting it happen purposely so the place does not have stability. And that comes back to like the Baathists were keep saying, is like, we just want our national stability. Mm-hmm. But then they turn out somebody like Saddam Hussein, who basically conducts an ethnic genocide on Shia minorities. And so it's just like, there is no good character here. There is no happy character.
Yeah, there's no
bring it back
ending.
to like, Bashar al-Assad was not the greatest fucking president, was not the greatest fucking leader. However, just like before, the amount of people Saddam Hussein killed was not even close to the amount that America, the United States, bombed the fuck out of Iraq. It's over 1 million people dead, right? Libya, Gaddafi, as much as you like or hate Gaddafi.
Yeah, rest in peace, Gaddafi. He was. I think he was actually kind of one of the better ones.
I think he was one of the better ones, right? He had his fucking things that were not that great either, but he also gave his people the highest standard of living on earth.
Yeah,
and what
he
happened,
was like
stability.
Libya's Sankara, basically. Like not quite to the like.
And he's not a socialist. He's not a socialist.
He wasn't
either.
even that socialist, right? Or like he was just a competent leader.
Yeah, but he was also somewhat of a humanitarian. He allowed people to have basically free electricity, free water, whatever they needed. He allowed to give his people, but there was no power of the people, and people didn't like that. And America and Western imperialists basically used that to fucking essentially fund groups and forces in Libya to create dissent, right? And once they took Gaddafi out, there was basically open slave markets in Libya. So yes, even if you say Gaddafi was not a fucking great leader, not a great person, he was this, he was that, he was a dictator, everybody in that country was living life of leisure, life of luxury.
A lot better than they had been before him, and a lot worse.
It was known to be the best standard of living on earth. So it's like, he might not agree with his political ideology, but he's not mass killing people in his country. He's not creating turmoil. And then what happens? Now Libya is literally an open slave market, basically. So what was worse? You could have just kept the guy and maybe made some fucking agreements with him. Now either they did it to Saddam Hussein. Now fucking Iraq is literally like political corruption, and it's not like it wasn't before, but now there's like no agreement. Nothing is being built. They at least they had a stable country under him, and now it's not stable, and the country is blown up. And now Syria's
going to be the same way.
It's going to be the same way.
Fall,
So it's like this repetitive historical moment where you're like, we can kind of just say what's going to happen. Afghanistan. How many we funded the Mujahideens in Afghanistan, and they turned around and basically fucking declared war in America.
Well, that's kind of the funny thing about the Syrian fighting is that like one half of the fighting in Syria was funded by like the CIA, and the other half was funded by like the DoD, and it's just like both sides of that conflict are funded by America. And there's like a darker side to this too, which we haven't touched on. The Syrian issue is that now, like the parasite that it is, Israel smells this blood in the water, and they're pushing in. And Netanyahu is called to double the population of settlements in the Golan Heights, pushing into.
He's actually pushed past this whole.
They're past the Golan Heights. Apparently, they're now an hour from Damascus and have excursioned. I don't know if you can use that as a past tense verb. They have incurred. They're in Damascus. They've taken Damascus. So as I understand, they've since like backed from like actually holding Damascus.
Yeah.
But they're like posted up an hour. They're in a village an hour from Damascus as of like 10 hours ago. Yeah. And they're just staying there, and they're pushing in. That's pretty far.
Yeah, that's so far. That's
like many miles from their northeast border. Yeah.
Hundreds of miles. And their whole idea behind why they did that is to create a so-called buffer zone. Mm-hmm. The Golan Heights was supposed to be the buffer zone. Mm-hmm. Right now, this is basically just colonialization of Syria, because
once Assad on chaos, and it's a real estate grab. It's literally a land grab. It's just pushing in. It's what we did to I say we as colloquially as it's what America did to like the native people that are here. You rush in, you divide, conquer, which was what they have done, and then rush in, land grab, and then build condos on it and make a killing. Yeah. And that's what they're doing.
Exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know?
And this isn't like, it's literally not their country. They just like are stealing another country because there's no real leadership or no kind of chain of command.
And they have no say. Be like, oh, this was part of Israel historically.
Yeah.
This part was never part of Israel historically. And so like. Now I was like, who's really going to believe you, man? Like at the end of the day, it's like you're claiming you're doing all this to create what Israel was at one point, but now you're going outside of the boundaries of what Israel was. So what's your excuse this time? And it's to create a buffer zone. Shut the fuck up. Like we know exactly what happened.
That anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. So
this is like a super interesting story that's unfolding, and like you mentioned, what happened with Iraq, what happened with Libya, what happened with most African countries that are in most South American countries, any country that kind of has like some either socialist or humanitarian angle leader that was killed. Chile, it gets meddled with. Rebel groups or civil war, but which are always code for like U.S. backed or Western backed like forces.
Yeah.
Overthrow or somehow depose. At least Assad isn't assassinated. At least he's still alive. So there's a hope for like him taken back over again or something. Maybe one day. All of these countries, they always follow the same pattern as they fall into just extreme chaos, just like death and strife and disease. Much worse than like was ever in place prior to their fall in the first place. So I don't know. We'll see what's happening.
I do want to talk one last point about this.
What you got?
I want to talk about the current rebel group that is now holding Syria hostage, basically.
So like the ISIS-backed group, or like you mean?
So this is where we are in the middle of the fog of war.
Yeah.
These rebels, they were not necessarily funded by the U.S., but they're kind of pushed as like, oh, these guys, this is better than Assad, and they're kind of backing the rebels in a certain way. Let's talk about the leader. The leader, if I can find his name, Abu Muhammad al-Jilani. So
al-Jilani sounds familiar. Has he been around for a while? Is he like a figure? Okay.
Yeah, he's been around for a little bit. He was formerly an Al-Qaeda member.
Yeah. Okay, I think
he was openly formerly an Al-Qaeda member. And he has come out recently to say he's in favor of pluralism, of multicultural haven for Syria, blah, 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 blah. This guy listen, once you're an Al-Qaeda member, once you're a Nazi member, once you're a member of such a like extremist group of nationalists and stuff, you're always that. There's always that hint in the back of your brain, and he's trying to reassure the world leaders that he's not going to conduct some crazy fucking shit like ISIS is. But like I said, once you're a leader of Al-Qaeda, you're going to have a knack. Even if you did change, you're going to have a sympathy for things that you still think would be better under that sort of ideology.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just find it funny. I was like, yeah, sure, bro. Yeah, you totally multiculturalism. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
We'll see how that goes.
We'll see what happens. But these rebels are Sunni fundamentalists.
Yeah.
right? These are Sunni fundamentalists, just like Saudi Arabia is a Sunni fundamentalist, just like Al Qaeda is a Sunni fundamentalist, just like ISIS was a Sunni fundamentalist, right? So any religious government is a no-go in my point, and this is coming from a person who grew up in a Muslim household. Religion and government should not exist together.
The opposite
right?
is bad.
It's always bad. It's always bad. And this is one of the fucking fallbacks of Assad's regime. Assad's government, whatever the fuck you want to call it. He was an Alawite. He was a minority. And a lot of the Syrians were constantly complaining that this minority of the Alawites had way too much political power because the majority of the political power was held by this ethnic minority, right? And so that created this not even fear or not even like hate, but like
just tension.
This tension to make sure the majority has the power again. And people like this guy will use that to his advantage to make himself look like he is
this natural successor, this like chosen leader.
Yeah, not even a natural successor, but like he is going to bring back balance the power back to the majority of the people, like this democratic elected haven. And I'm like, okay, if you really wanted to be this democratically elected leader, hold elections. Yeah. Maybe not now, maybe a year later, year and a half. I'll give you some space and time.
I would be shocked if there were elections.
Yeah, but even if there were, you know, the U.S. is going to meddle into that and place somebody in power that's going to be pro fucking America. Yeah, so this is all bad. This is all bad. I'm telling you now, this is all bad.
We're definitely going to be keeping a pretty close eye on this because like every it seems like every like couple days we get like a new update. Like recently, like Israel just like pushing in, like out of nowhere, which is a little suspect and like leads me to believe that like that probably just proves the point that everyone kind of assumed, which was that like a lot of this was Western meddling, kind of like influencing or supplying or funding or in some way kind of like orchestrating this like this push. And so it sounds like with Israel just jumping on this so soon, like they were kind of primed for it. But
it's almost like they knew.
Yeah, I mean, and if not they knew, but I mean like Israel is like proven. I don't know if like. Well, I would probably venture to say they knew, but even if they didn't know, Israel's proven itself to be pretty opportunistic and like
correct.
They're gonna do what they're gonna do, and that's like land grab in Arab land that doesn't belong to them, or you know, not necessarily Arab, but just land that doesn't belong to them, and that's what they did. Yeah. So I don't know. We're going to be keeping a close eye on this. We'll
keep you guys updated. Again, it's the fog of war.
It's incredibly complicated, as you mentioned. It's fog of war. It is really hard to find kind of like
really good information,
reliable information that's coming out of this that it's not biased. It's like it's crazy to think like in 2024 that there would be like in just how interconnected the world is, there would be like a shortage of news on like a major global event, but it is kind of like hard to parse what's coming out of this.
I try to find as much information as I possibly
and also
could.
Like there is like we all know mainstream media is like corporate owned and kind of like not to be relied on and not to be trusted, but there is reports and this is kind of a smaller thing, but like it was ABC or CBS or one of their affiliates or something was like filming part of what was going on in Syria, and they were directing the soldiers to remove ISIS patches and like remove any kind of patches that were like unfavorable or that Americans have an unfavorable view on. So it's like they're already trying to like, and that just not that that's that big a deal, but it definitely shows that like they're not being unbiased. They're just like they're not showing the truth of it. They're twisting it to be more palatable to Americans. Which, if you're an honest journalist, you don't do that.
Exactly.
But also in relation to all of this too, Biden has now removed ISIS from like the terrorist watch list, like a terrorist group. ISIS is now our ally. I don't know if you saw that or not, but like Biden is now we're friendly to ISIS now because like they're our buddies again, I guess. Fuck, what? So like I don't know, and I don't know like the full details on that. I'll have to pull that up. But like
again,
as I understand
just things are just coming out, so we're not trying to spew any misinformation out. We're just trying to put very basic information that almost everybody knows that you could find information on if you can find it, and basically just relay that information to you with our commentation.
Yeah. So we're gonna stay on top of that, but we'll see.
One thing I do want to talk about really quick is like, have you heard about the whole Elon Musk basically trying to block the spending bill that's supposed to happen this month?
I saw that it was the Doge bill, his spending bill, not that it was being blocked, but that it was being pushed forward. It proposed like $100 billion cuts or some insane amount of money on everything, but zero to Department of Defense, zero to the cuts to the military.
Yeah,
but I don't know what you're referring to.
Maybe on Sunday after that podcast, we can sit and talk for half an hour and do like a short a short episode or something just to keep up with it going on. So from what I understand is there's a bipartisan bill that's in the House right now or in the Senate that they're trying to pass. And this bill is just basically a spending bill.
Oh, I heard about this. So this is just like the budget bill, like
exactly. This is just a
the
spending bill
non-government shutdown bill that we do this every year. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's basically trying to have the government go and shut down. And there's a lot of excuses that he's trying to say. And
that sounds like something he would do that he doesn't understand the actual full ramifications of, because that's really bad.
Trump is behind it. Yeah, but my whole theory is why they're doing this is not because they don't agree what's in the bill. My theory is, if you shut the government spending bill and anything else that comes through, anything that Biden could do to fuck up Trump in the last couple of months of his presidency, it basically is just nullified because now Congress is inactive. Yeah. Right. So he can't fuck up Trump on his last couple months out.
Oh. Yeah.
Right. That's just my theory of what's going on.
Wouldn't it? I don't think it goes into effect until the next fiscal year, though. So like, it wouldn't matter. It would
It's supposed to be by like the middle, the end of this month. It's supposed to go into effect.
Yeah, but I mean, Trump gets sworn in on like what, the 22nd or 20th or something. So like, it would only be 20 days, I guess.
Yeah, but sure. 20 days, like you can put a lot. There's a lot of things you can do in one day.
Yeah, could, yes, but that's putting a lot of faith that Biden actually cares to do anything.
But I think
helpful.
I'm not trying to say Biden's trying to do anything helpful. I'm just saying Biden can do something politically motivated to make it harder for them to do anything.
I think that's putting way too much faith that Biden cares, or like it would do something like that, because he's such a milquetoast, like just peaceful transition of power guy.
That's very true.
He's not going to do anything.
That's true.
Bold.
But then
he should. Again, I'm saying, like, yes, he should do something bold. He should be signing executive order after executive order, like doing anything he can.
But then again, he said he wouldn't pardon fucking Hunter, and he did. That's something we haven't talked about.
We didn't really talk about that. Which I mean, there's just, that's what I'm saying. There's so much stuff is happening. Like, we haven't talked about the Brian Thompson, Luigi Mangione escapade. He was caught. The Brian Thompson United Healthcare shooter was caught.
Should we move on to that?
I guess so. We could just talk about this briefly. Luigi Mangione was caught. He was caught in Altoona, Maryland. Altoona, Pennsylvania.
I can't.
He was caught in somewhere in the northwest, the northeast.
I
forget, in a McDonald's. But so here's part of the story that didn't add up to me is it was a tip that called in because he was caught trying to use a fake ID, is what like the sources originally said. But I'm like, what do you ever need an ID for at McDonald's? And he still had his gun on him and like everything. And I'm like,
and a manifesto that was already written.
And I'm like, I don't want to get too conspiratorial about this whole thing, but like the whole thing was fishy. Like, I don't know, man. But like, and I also think that like he is politically like ignorant on a lot of things. He's not like very developed politically. Correct. He's not actually like a leftist or a socialist.
No, he's not.
He's just kind of, his politics are all over the place. I think if anything, he's just kind of a liberal, but with some weird tendencies here and there. His manifesto was like if he wrote it, it was like I read it. It was like just the idea of insurance companies, but was kind of understanding of like the working class struggles with healthcare, but like it was very underdeveloped and it had no real political leanings. It was more just like anti-healthcare because he had a personal issue with healthcare, both him and his family. Yeah,
so once it affects you personally, that's when they actually have empathy for it.
Yeah.
But what was I going to say? Jesus Christ, I just blanked.
Yeah, well, I would just add that there's a lot of discussion on this, like especially like if you're as glued into like leftist, like
I think everybody's kind of keeping up on this, and there's nothing we could really say to like.
Well, my point was that like people are like talking about like, oh, he's not actually a leftist, so he shouldn't be a champion or a hero.
Absolutely
and
not.
stuff.
No, we should definitely be championing him.
I agree. I think that doesn't matter his politics. He's
what
class.
He did was class conscious.
There's consolidation of class consciousness. People all over the class spectrum, whether or not you're blue or red or kind of like, urban or suburban or like a middle class mom, like a soccer mom, or like a working class dude in Detroit or whatever. Everybody's kind of rallying around this guy. This has been the most catalyzing class consolidation like event in my lifetime.
Very long time.
I think so, probably in my lifetime. And like, so I don't really care that he wasn't like a developed, well-read Marxist. That's kind of irrelevant. Like his action spurn class consciousness, and like that's a good thing.
Exactly. That's what really matters, is that like it made a lot more people aware, and now we're having more conversations about this 100%. This horrible problem that we have of medical insurance.
But he's also, the big news is that now he's been charged with murder as like terrorist. Like
so
he's a terrorist.
So from what I understand, because it's in New York,
for
first degree murder, it has to be murder against like a police officer, a peace officer, various other figures that are not like regular citizens. Otherwise, it's not considered first degree murder. It's considered second degree murder. So right now they have him ready to charge on second degree murder. However, in New York, if it's considered an act of terrorism, then it can be considered a first degree murder.
So they want to pin first degree murder, so they're just trying to find. I think that might backfire though, because I think any successful defense lawyer could like argue that it's not terrorism, and if that's their case,
you can say it's
just a single target, but it's just a single target on a single individual. How is that terrorism? And like I think what the prosecution is arguing is that like it's like created this era, this feeling of terror among CEOs. Like there's been like increased security, private security details. Like apparently like there's been like exposés about how like CEOs are scared and stuff. And like, so that's the terrorist angle. But, and I'm like, yeah, obviously that's a good thing, but like that isn't like that's no more terrorism than just any murder. Like it's just a murder.
Correct.
Yeah. It's like, it's
revenge.
It's revenge, but it's also just appalling that like now the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal are calling this terrorism and like writing these op-eds about like how, you know, CEOs shouldn't have to feel afraid. They're just regular people that want to go to work, and so they shouldn't feel afraid. But none of these exposés or op-eds are written about all the school shootings. Like that's not terrorism, but this is.
Yeah. So
that is fucking infuriating.
There's what was it? Where that, God, I'm really bad with names. That one sick little individual white kid that shot up that black church.
Oh, I don't remember his name.
You know what I'm talking about, though.
I know who you're talking about, but I don't remember his name. Yeah.
So he ended up killing 7 or 8 people, and in his manifesto it was to kill black people to start a race war, which is literally terrorism.
Yeah.
They didn't charge him with terrorism, and he killed more than one person. So this is obviously like a politically motivated arrest. It's a politically motivated jury, and from what I understand is like the jury that they're trying to find a very specific jury to put him on through a grand jury, and I don't know, it doesn't seem good for him. It's not good for him, but I think what he did really grew some class consciousness, and that is what they're truly afraid of at the end of the day. And I really hope, again, I don't want any other CEOs murdered, but if they do, I don't really care. Yeah. Right. The whole point is just like to create awareness. Like I remember one person saying like, we've been fighting this fight, whether it be healthcare, environmental protections, blah, blah, blah. We've been fighting this fight for fucking decades.
Yeah. Hundreds of years essentially at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
And nothing has ever fucking changed. This one guy gets fucking shot. Right. And suddenly there's like we haven't seen this much change in like a public perception in so fucking long.
Yeah.
And they're like, violence is not the answer. I'm like, apparently it fucking is. Apparently it fucking is, because it's the only thing that has actually brought something to the attention, brought something to the news.
I've always said like this has been a pretty like mainstay position of mine is like, yes, violence does work and violence is good and like violence is necessary. You can't have like any type of meaningful revolution or meaningful change without violence. Like
I always ask somebody, like, name something historic that happened, a historic change without violence.
Yeah, and then somebody would say like, oh, like Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Act. It's like, well, that didn't happen until after Martin Luther King was assassinated and there were riots.
Yeah,
and
plus there was also Malcolm X. That you can't disregard Malcolm X.
Yeah, you can't disregard the Black Panther movement or Malcolm X and like all of this other like Black liberation movement and just say
he was the only person
he was the only one. And like
LBJ
just like magnanimously gave rights to black men because
just
Martin
because
Luther King,
like had I dreams.
Yeah,
I had a dream.
He walked in the streets, and it's like you're forgetting a lot of history to make that happen. So like that's one I hear a lot is that it's like, well, that worked without violence. It's like, no, it didn't actually. Also not for nothing, but the FBI assassinated Martin Luther King too. Once they didn't need him anymore, or like once he became too much of a problem. So
and then they flipped around when he started his poor people campaign for like socialist reforms, for economic reforms.
Yeah, so like you're forgetting a lot. That's pretty revisionist history. So I don't really grant that premise, but. Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty wild, and we'll have to kind of keep an eye on again what happens with that trial as he goes to trial.
Correct.
Do you want to lightning round? We're coming up on an hour, so like let's lightning round this last bit of news here.
What would you know about the South Korean?
I know a decent amount about the South Korea. I went a little deep. Yeah. So I know we promised this, and then an episode on like the historical like Korean situation. And I'll admit, I started going down that rabbit hole of the historical, and like that country, holy shit. I knew it started with like a very Pinochet-esque level of like anti-communist hatred and like fascist dictatorship.
Yeah.
Like US backed, like we I forget his name. Park. Was the first president of South Korea Park? I don't remember. I don't want to generalize, but the first president of South Korea was an awful man that the U.S. Installed. He was a brutal murderer, like a Pinochet level kind of guy, like a real piece of shit. And ever since then, it has not really gotten any better. South Korea is like a really corrupt, really violent, and really like repressive country to any kind of like progress or revolution. And I started going down this, and I was like,
Syngman Rhee.
Rhee was his name. Rhee was his name. Yeah.
Rhee.
Yeah. So like I was trying to find this coup. There was a big military coup and big martial law that took place in the 80s where like hundreds of people died, if not thousands of like protesters died. Journalists were like detained. Unions were suspended. All news outlets were suspended. Like it was a big deal for a long time in Korea. Yeah. And I tried to find this detail, and it was like the coup d'etat of May 17th, the coup d'etat of June 12th. And it's like, dude, I was getting like lost in the rabbit hole of trying to like parse the history of coups and martial laws.
That's like Syria, history. Bro. That was literally Syria.
And I was like, okay, I had to like pause that to like understand this current one. So like I focused on the current one. I still want to do that short episode, and like we can do that maybe Sunday after.
Yeah, we
should just do a little short on Korea. I'll have time because this Friday, tomorrow, is my last day of school for like 2.5 weeks. So I'm on winter break now, so I can do it. I have some time to read about South Korea. But anyway, let me get to this current South Korean situation. Okay, so the current South Korean situation is as follows. On the 3rd, President Yoon declared martial law. And so like that was what we all heard, and we're all like, well, what does that mean? And we knew that there were South Korean troops that kind of like stormed their capital, or reverse stormed the capital. They were holding the capital, stopping people from getting in, stopping lawmakers from getting in. Well, it turns out it's actually, so now that like more information is about this, it's actually a little goofier and stupider and more confusing than people thought. Apparently his like defense minister was like Googling essentially like how to stop Parliament from blocking martial law once we like ahead of time.
He was Googling this shit?
It was apparently there was, I don't, Google's a strong word, but there was research done of like how to like what's the mechanism for stop, because like he knew that like the South Korean like Congress, the South Korean Parliament can override the martial law. So like his administration was trying to find out, well, how do we stop them from stopping our martial law? So this was definitely premeditated. It was planned.
Yeah.
Also, so
I mean, most coups are planned. You don't just
sort of, except for this one was so poorly like executed that it almost feels like
when they try to get Juan Guaido to become the president of Venezuela.
Yeah, so like I don't know what's going on. So anyway, like the defense minister also tried to instigate a skirmish with North Korea. He had ordered strikes on this area of North Korea where like there's like a trash dump type area. He tried to like order airstrikes on, and like I guess that was refused. And so like shout out to like a handful of soldiers in the South Korean military, because if they hadn't like basically disobeyed direct orders, like he intentionally tried to start a war with North Korea. Like
wow.
They intentionally tried to like there was an actual order to strike North Korea, to instigate a skirmish on the border, to then that was when they declared martial law, so that it was going to be like coincided, it was going to be planned, so that it was like there's a skirmish on the border, we're at war with North Korea, we are now under martial law for your protection. And then also it was to like crack down on anti-state pro-North Korean sentiment within the opposition party, because the president is on the conservative party. He's like kind of a right-wing guy, and he has incredibly low approval numbers. So and other people were like, is he just doing this as like a military stunt, because like getting shot, doing like strong military actions raises your approval ratings? And he is basically a lame duck president, because the opposition party, which are not pro-North Korean anti-state people, they're just basically neoliberals. They're just liberals. They're just Korean liberals. They have a huge majority in parliament, and like basically like he doesn't have a mandate, and he is a lame duck president. So there's a lot of like, he has a lot of political motivation to like stage some kind of like drastic, bold takeover.
Correct.
Anyway, a lot of this comes from an anonymous whistleblower about the strike on North Korea and about the premeditation, like the researching and stuff. So it's not totally clear how much of this information is accurate at this point. They're still in court. He's since been impeached, the president, but he's representing himself in court because he is an ex-prosecutor. So like, which is never a good idea. Don't ever represent yourself.
Yeah.
Anyway, let me back up a little bit. So the army attempts to block South Korean lawmakers from entering their like national like their like parliament building to override this martial law. law. The chief of the Army's Special Warfare Command was ordered to break into Congress, drag out and detain any lawmakers, and then fire blanks at them. And he said he considered storming the building and firing blanks to like disrupt their vote, just like actually like open fire, but with blanks to stop their vote, because he was basically ordered by the president to like stop the vote at any means necessary.
Wow.
And he defied that order. He like decided to refuse the order. So that's another reason like they didn't end up just killing and detaining all of the people voting against the measure. The National Intelligence Service director was also ordered to arrest different opposition lawmakers leading up to and during it. He was also ordered to arrest and detain any journalist that was like a couple of specific journalists that were critical of his government. So this was very much like the generals had orders to take out lawmakers. Their Secret Service had like orders to like detain journalists at this time and take out lawmakers. This was very much like
that's a
coordinated, but luckily like literally all of them said no, basically. Every one of these guys was
out of
like
your goddamn mind?
No. Yeah, and I guess the National Intelligence Service directors in testimony, because like so there's a lot of these guys have since been like deposed and given testified. The National Intelligence Service called him quote insane, and he was just like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah,
which is pretty funny. 300 soldiers, give or take, did storm the building and detain some of those officials on the basis of preventing election fraud. Like that's what their like ultimate like excuse was election fraud going on, which is like, if you know anything about like the American January 6th, like that's a very flimsy thing. Like even like in Korea, everyone's like, that's an obvious like right wing kind of grift. There have been rumors, again, these are unconfirmed rumors, that a lot of South Korean soldiers were dressed as North Korean soldiers, ready to like fire on crowds and stuff, dressed as North Koreans to instigate like more tension between.
What was that, like a World War II incident where it's like they're trying to invade Poland, so they like pretended Poland shot at them?
Oh, I don't know. That's like the Gulf of Tonkin incident too in Vietnam. It's just a bunch of false flag shit. That's what there were rumors that they were doing.
Planting a false flag. Yeah,
that's not confirmed. There were a bunch of orders that ignored or their orders to a bunch of soldiers, that ignored their orders to detain those opposition politicians at the Capitol or the Congress building, and then apparently about 100 soldiers just left their posts. They were like, fuck this, we're not gonna like fire on our own citizens and stuff. But a bunch of protesters and a bunch of like pro-democracy protesters rallied. The soldiers barricaded the Congress with like desks, and they were sparing and like just whatever debris and shit they could. There's reports that the soldiers were using fire extinguishers on the crowd to try to like get them from, but eventually the lawmakers, there's a one video of a lawmaker scaling a fence past soldiers.
Oh my god.
And like because they're like, because they have to get into like basically like if they wanted to keep their country, they had to pass this vote, and they had to have a quorum of 150 out of the 300 lawmakers, and they did 190 lawmakers. I think 191 actually ended up voting on the resolution to cancel the martial law, and they did. He has since been impeached. Apparently it's a really easy mechanism to like impeach presidents in Korea. I don't fully understand their like I don't understand the constitutional rule of Korea. I haven't gone that much into it. It's a whole other deep dive, and it's like, it's difficult enough to understand American law, let alone another country that you don't speak the language. It's not that easy to like read sources on this shit. But yeah, so he is being tried now, and so in insurrection, he's being charged with insurrection, which obviously, I mean, it looks obvious that he committed from an outside perspective. That's the only crime, however, that presidents can be convicted of in Korea. Like they're basically like how the Supreme Court here just ruled that presidents are immune from basically crime. They are too in Korea, with the exception of insurrection. So that's what the prosecutors are trying to put on him. Yeah. A lot of people are being arrested and like charged with this though. Like a lot of his his chief of staff who like orchestrated a lot of the stuff, like different higher command people. Like a lot of people aren't being charged because they defied orders. A lot of people are. Basically his trial is kind of just now ramping up, or at least the early stage of this prosecution has started. His lawyer has His lawyer put out a thing like it can't be a coup because he rescinded the order for martial law after like 2 to 3 hours. Like what, like, so like it's, I don't know. I don't speak the language and I don't know the history or the context too much, but this feels very much like a Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani relationship.
I was about to say
it has that, as I'm reading their quotes, and like obviously they're translated from Korean, but I'm just like, this is fucking Rudy Giuliani, man. It's just like, this is a Trump Giuliani shit show. And I'm like, this is so funny because like this is an unpopular right-wing populist president.
Yeah.
And his like goofy lawyer. And I'm like, dude, how funny is this? This is literally,
this is ridiculous.
I think, yeah. There's a temporary president in right now. His name is Han, I believe, or I want to say it's Han. He's like this interim president. But yeah, South Korean politics is a shit show. South Korean history is a shit show, and like it's a pretty corrupt oligarchy that's like most. We talked about this a little bit briefly, and I started researching more about this, but yeah, most like industry and politics in Korea is like it dwindles down to like 5 companies basically like own most of like the lobbies and the politicians in Korea, and it's just not a very like what we would consider like democratic or free as Marxists. Like it's democratic on paper to like America, like American government fully supports this because it's highly oligarchical and capitalist. So like we're all for it, but like
when it comes to economics,
but like actual economics, it's a very like corrupt and just like oligarchical society. And
because I'm sure there's like those like a few companies that really run everything over there. Samsung I know is a huge one.
There's a handful of companies.
The owner of Hyundai and Kia is one. Because I'm pretty sure it's like the same company that owns both of them, but don't quote me on that.
Okay.
Because they get their supply, all of their cars have like the same frame, same engines and everything. But regardless,
yeah. So this is another one of those stories I'm gonna keep following because like I want to see how this plays out because he's like he has a lawyer that's like his issuing statements through, but the news I saw was that when it actually goes to trial, he wants to represent himself. So
that's just stupid.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
It's a horrible idea. There's always bias. You need other people to represent you because they can take a different perspective.
Also, that's their job. They're professionals at it. And like, I don't care if you used to be a prosecutor, you're now a politician. Like, you don't have the chops, presumably. Like, you know, if like lawyers should never represent themselves, even if you are a lawyer, because like as you say, you need that kind of unbiased. Like, you need a second set of eyes on things to kind of see it impartially. But also, like, you need just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean you're like a trial defense lawyer or something. So like
correct. Especially you're going against the entire fucking government of South Korea. It's like you really think you're going to do the best job?
Yeah.
No.
Against like an opposition party that hates you and like is wants to take you down. Because I think the prosecutors are. Oh, but speaking of impeachment, this liberal his opposition party basically, they are pretty like heavy-handed with impeachment, and that was one of like the things he claimed in his martial law was like it was to stop their like out of control impeachments, but they're like impeaching prosecutors, right wing, like they're basically just like the liberal party is purging the Korean government of conservatism, which is like fine, I guess. I mean, I'm not really big into liberalism as an ideology, but I mean, I guess it's preferable to conservatism as an ideology. So like if it's just funny that this liberal government in Korea is like kind of attempting to purge like these right wing elements from the government, from the prosecutors, like the National Prosecutor's Office and stuff. And so the conservative president basically like is scared of that and like tired of it. He's a lame duck president. He's tanking approval ratings, and so his solution is just to plan this weird coup. And this brings me to my final point about this whole thing is it's so goofy, and like he rescinded it and like backtracked so fast that he got like cold feet on it. My initial thought was like I'm guessing a CIA agent like convinced him, or like a CIA asset team convinced him like if you do this you can like take back from like this liberal party that like, you can like take your country back. And then he got scared and like backed out, and now he's in trouble. And like the CIA is like shaking their head at home. Like, why didn't you follow through with this? I don't know if that's too conspiratorial. I don't know if everything in the world that bad is happening. I don't know if everything bad in the world happens because the CIA is involved.
I'm sure they have their little fucking stinky arm and everything.
Definitely CIA in any allied country, like especially like one on the border of
North Korea,
are essentially America's worst enemy, quote unquote America's worst enemy. 100% there are a ton of intelligence assets in South Korea, no doubt.
Correct.
Whether or not they had a hand in this, I don't know if that's too conspiratorial. It seems so blundered and so bungled and so weird and so like wishy-washy that people would just go all out on something incredibly dangerous and bold, like a huge gamble to risk everything on a coup, and then be like, no, just kidding. It just seems like there's like
JK psych.
Yeah, it just seems like that wouldn't be like somebody's own doing. It seems like there's like a puppet behind that who's like, I don't know. Maybe that's me reading too much into it. But that's where I'm at so far with South Korea. That's kind of the whole gist of it, is it was a failed coup that was premeditated 100%, that was like more sinister and like more planned than what we originally thought, with like false flag kind of operations, ordered strikes that were then failed to follow through with, and then also then like just the whole thing fell apart.
Yeah.
So like it could have been this could have been like a whole thing if say that general hadn't, or say that this is true and those strikes had actually been ordered, which is still unconfirmed, but had they actually been followed through with, and like an actual skirmish with North Korea had started, that would have been a fucking huge thing. That would have been a whole different story. Yes, like that could have been
World War III.
Easily, because like China, we're also treaty bound to assist with Korea, so like that would have been America basically treaty bound to like assist Korea at war with North Korea. So like America would be in Korea fighting Koreans and probably
Kim
Chinese.
Jong-un's like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah. He's like, that wasn't us, right? No, that was a false flag.
Yeah. All right, the last thing I really want to kind of talk about, it's quite short, but I just found it to be like on a funny note. The drones, man.
Oh, I saw memes about these drones, and I'm like, what is everybody talking about? Because like I was like doing work, and I completely missed the story. What's going on with the drones? You tell me what's going on with the drones.
I couldn't tell you as well. From what I know is like there's drones going on in New Jersey. There's drones everywhere.
Apparently, there are drones in Seattle. Like they're everywhere.
People are shooting at them. Blah blah blah. But there's no real statistical proof that these drones actually exist. And they're like these are just airplanes. Is this just like the Cuban? What's the Cuban
syndrome? Havana syndrome. Like is this just like mass hysteria?
Yeah, but you know what it reminds me of? God, what was it a while back where they're like aliens exist? The U.S. government just comes out. Aliens exist.
Congress last year or whatever, or was that even earlier this year? Jesus, it's been a long year, man.
Yeah, he's like aliens exist. Like, and then everybody starts talking about aliens, and I'm like, oh my God, they're trying to cover something up while something's going on, right? And we have this whole thing going on with fucking Luigi and the fucking Mario Brothers over here.
Yeah, okay, that's what you're
and there's like a lot of class consciousness, really like.
Quick throw a distraction at him.
Yeah. Basically this class consciousness that's like reviving itself that didn't exist for such a long time, since like the civil rights era, and suddenly they're like drones, please look, there's fucking drones. It's like, wow, I've never seen everybody so united. Look at the fucking drones.
I will say, at least to my like following and my like algorithms on my social medias, that didn't really make much of a dent. I saw a couple posts here and there about the drones, and I was just like, I don't really care about this. I want to read more about Luigi. So like,
and I honest to heart, I honestly think that's what the fucking government was trying to do.
Yeah,
like it's a little conspiratorial, but it's like, what, this came out of nowhere. No, what the fuck are we talking about? Drones, and it's like it's pretty much almost out already. Like nobody's talking about the drones.
I haven't seen anything about it in a couple days again.
Yeah,
so
it's
I think it's over.
I'm pretty sure they just threw out.
Maybe it was aliens. That's the thing, is like if aliens came down right now,
dude, I would be like, let's go aliens.
I don't know. I don't know if anybody would care. It'd be like, oh, aliens are happening. Yeah, but have you seen what's going on in Syria though? Like that's I don't know.
My brother Luigi, free Luigi, dog.
Free Luigi.
You know?
I don't have time for your alien nonsense right now.
Yeah, we knew about the aliens 20 years ago, 30 years ago, bro. What's
I don't know. It just seems like there's just a lot happening in the world right now.
I just thought it was a funny little thing.
Yeah, it definitely. This feels different, right? Or is that just, I don't know. This feels this feels momentous.
It is momentous. And I hate to say it, but like if a couple of more of them got shot, I feel like,
I don't mean just that. I just mean like Syria and just like in Korea, and just it feels like we're living in like, this is like that goofy shit that happened like in Europe in 1914 and 1913, and like and again in like China and Japan and Poland in 1930s, and it's just like, this is just like these catalysts that like we're gonna look back on and say this is the shit that started it. Like the trains that Japan bombed in China in the 30s, and Hitler annexing Czechoslovakia and Austria in the 30s, and
Israel
then, like,
invading and taking Syrian land.
Yeah, like that. These things are like, they're obvious precursors. Looking back on it historically now, looking back on it with hindsight, we're like, oh yeah, these were the precursors to like Japanese like aggression and expansion. Correct. And Hitler's like aggression.
There's something really going on in the fucking water right now.
I don't know, and maybe now we will see this as like, oh, this started like this. I don't know. Maybe I'm too much of a history teacher, and like I want that. I'm
kind of looking forward to it.
Not necessarily looking forward to it, but I just mean like I'm
looking forward to it.
Well, I'm not looking forward to it, but I mean like I think my reading of history books is shading my. I'm biased, and like my judgment is clouded.
I don't think your judgment is clouded. I think
Charlie.
I think just like any type of analyst, any type of analyst can look at something and see a trend, and predict something,
100%.
like whether it be the
I think
market.
historians do that best.
Yeah, and because we have all the records of history, and you can see what happens over and over again, and you can kind of be like, this looks like this could be some sort of moment, and we're not saying for sure, but it's like listen, like usually these moments end up with like fucking brutal destruction of the earth, right? Yeah. But they're also big
the
moments.
Death of millions. So like, it's not good.
No, it's not good. It's not good. Don't get me wrong. I do not want the death of millions. I do not want fucking World War III. But what I'm saying is there is change on the other side, right? And when it comes to environmental factors like the fucking earth is becoming a fucking heated ball, or there's crazy disasters going on everywhere. If we needed huge change, it would be right now. Because if we have any larger change later on in the future, where it be the 40s or 50s, it's going to be too late.
Yeah.
I'm saying that from like an environmental perspective. I'm saying that from like a perspective of class consciousness, where we're really like turning back the tide and turning into like a techno-feudalist state. Yeah. I've been reading too much of a...
Well, what's it?
The Greek... God, how do I know? Varoufakis.
Yeah.
I've been reading too much of Varoufakis. I'm reading that book right now. Yeah. So we're transitioning into like a capitalist state into a techno-feudalist state.
Yeah. Which is like, we thought we were in the end stage of capitalism. Well, it turns out there's the next worst stage after the war.
And that late stage capitalism is basically regressing into some sort of feudalism, like a techno-feudalism, like he's talking about. And it makes total sense. And if we want real change, it needs to happen now before our entire fucking society falls apart.
Yeah. Well, and like that's a good kind of note to end on, is like change is here and it feels revolutionary, sort of. It just I don't know. Maybe like I said, maybe I'm biased, maybe I'm just on the leftist internet too much, but it just feels very like consolidated. It feels very there's a level of class consciousness and class consolidation that I haven't seen in my lifetime yet.
Correct.
It feels like we're on the cusp. Maybe if a couple more like inciting incidents, if a couple more momentous events happen in the next 6 months to a year or something, maybe something can start to give. Hopefully, I don't know. We'll have to see and kind of wait and see.
Yeah.
And watch and discuss it here. So make sure you're subscribed to follow it.
Yeah,
that was my segue into our plugs. Thanks so much, guys. That's going to be it for us. We talked a little long today, but it was a good one. I had fun with this one a lot. Thanks so much for sharing the Syrian history. That was very enlightening.
Well, I did the best that I could with like how short of information we had.
Kudos to you. That was really great. So give us if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit the like, comment, subscribe, and share this with a friend. Just make sure you're subscribed. The subscriber numbers are continuing to grow. We love the feedback in the comments. We really appreciate all the love we're seeing on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, we do have the audio version. Get your podcast app of choice: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, wherever you get your podcast.
If you're so inclined, we also have an Instagram,
TikTok,
Twitter.
I'm on Blue Sky personally. It's kind of starting. There's a lot of momentum on Blue Sky. I'm liking it. It's a little libby, but it's not fashy.
Yeah.
So it's like
you should definitely open that account for
us. I'll make a Blue Sky. I've made 2 Blue Sky accounts, one for the Seattle Communist group and then another for myself. So give me a follow on Blue Sky, best rapper alive. I'm having a good time over there.
Oh yeah. But besides that, we also have a free Patreon. And free Patreon.
Yeah, we do have a free Patreon. There's some bonus stuff. There's like outtakes. If we have any kind of like written reviews from the podcast app, we'll read those out over there. We're trying to just kind of build some just some extra stuff for people that are so inclined that aren't on our normal YouTube or podcast feed. And finally, we have a Discord. We have a Discord. There's a handful of other kind of content creators hanging out in that Discord as well. So not to like totally like name drop, but like if you are familiar with some of the other leftist space or people that we've had on as guests here, and you drop in that Discord, that you can kind of chat with all of us in there.
Again, we're a small channel, so the Discord is not fucking constantly popping.
The Discord
you can
is not
make it pop.
Popping, but
we do reply.
We do reply when we see it. If you tag, especially if you tag us, so we get notified. And always. Revolutionary Rhetoric is an affiliate of the Anti-Capitalist Podcast Network, so give those guys some love, give those guys a shout.
We're all growing together.
We're all growing together, and they're doing some really cool stuff. We've had a few chats with Craig and Jordan and the different people at the different pods over there.
Absolutely, we got to get Green and Red back on.
Yeah, I really want to talk to those guys. That'd be so cool.
Yeah, I'll contact them.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe over the winter sometime. I don't know. I think a lot of podcasts are like pausing because of like all the holidays.
Yeah, well, after the holidays, sometime in January.
For sure. All right, well, that's everything from us. Much love out there, guys. Go join some mutual aid group and help your community out, and stay safe.
Cool.
And happy holidays. If we don't have an episode over the holiday break, happy holidays.
Happy holidays, guys. Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye.